There was a time in my life probably when I was a little more like going out and getting fucked up and waking up hungover and being like, I don't really feel like going to the studio today. I'm kind of out of it, and probably nothing's gonna come. That is a great attitude if you want to get absolutely nothing done. I do believe in going to the studio every day. Of course, you're not gonna wake up every morning feeling the muse of inspiration, but there's so many days that I've gone there thinking like, I wonder if nothing's gonna come today, and then maybe hour 2, hour 3, you hit a chord and you're like, oh fuck, that's a cool chord. Let me see, and then you're sort of off to the races writing something. So you just have to go.
Cool. Welcome to Idea Generation, Mark Ronson.
Thank you.
Congratulations on the book. It's a fantastic read for anyone out there. And I think a really candid and cogent snapshot of a fairly bygone part of New York City history and lore.
Yeah.
You talk a lot about the amount of labor that you had to put into learning about music and procuring music, vinyl in particular, of course. How would you say that labor shaped how you think about music?
I mean, it's so much easier to make music now in some ways. You can go online and download an entire Dylan, Boy Wonder drum library like that and have 700 snares. Like, the record that made me really, really fall in love with hip-hop in the way that what made me want to be a DJ was Pete Rock and CL Smooth, They Reminisce Over You. And then I think about how I found out that the sample was a song called Today by Tom Scott. And then I found one guy who went to my college who had that record, so I went to his room all the time to listen to it. I think about if that was me today, I would have gone to Who Sampled and been listening to it on Spotify 2 minutes later, right? Would I have loved the song any less? Probably not. Now, would I have lost some of that like extra like sacred, like chasing it down the hunt, the gratitude for when you finally got to enjoy that song? I think so. Now, that era's never coming back, so it gets like, it's silly to sort of like get into like it was better then or whatever, but maybe there was a bit more of this appreciation for how hard you had to work to find something. It made you sort of like cherish it a little bit more, but as much as my era was a pain in the ass probably to come up with, and like going around to like those record fairs like the Roosevelt Convention and finding records and asking people like, hey, is this the sample from Bonita Applebaum? But then also turning to your right and seeing Q-Tip walking into the same record fair, like you're not gonna bump into Q-Tip and Diamond D like on Who Sampled or in a Reddit room.
Your book, principally focuses on the first half of your career as a DJ, in which you were ostensibly hosting tons of focus groups about music over and over and over again.
Yeah.
How did that experience inform your decision-making process as a producer?
I think in the beginning, and the reason that my early music, when I listen to it, it sounds so influenced by whatever was going on at the time, whether it was starting off with DJ Premier and then probably the Neptunes. Like, you're playing these songs 4 or 5 hours a night, 4 nights a week, 12 or 13 Neptunes bangers, and then you expect to wake up the next day, fire up your MPC and make something that sounds completely your own. I mean, some people might be able to do it, but I certainly couldn't. And I think that the first record that I really made, the Nika Costa album, whether it was accidental or not, like took time off from being in the club to find something. Then again, like there's something about all those years that I spent DJing that made me realize probably that I could put together different genres of things that I really liked, whether it was EPMD, Biggie, AC/DC, and Rufus and Shaka Khan, and like there is a way to make those things work together. And then probably, or definitely to a fault, there's this thing when I make records that I'm always trying to, when I'm imagining the rhythm section, what the band is doing, I'm like, how can I make this more dancey? Or how can I make sure people move to this?
In the book, you talk very candidly about faux pas and mistakes that you made on your ascent. Lifting mixes from Stretch Armstrong jump out as one of the sort of funnier, seemingly innocuous, but almost career-ending moments. Did you ever feel like this might come to an end for you?
I was so passionate about DJing when I fell in love with it. I had half of my rent paid for by a trust fund that my grandfather had set up for me. Like, it was a pretty low, I only needed 2 gigs a week basically to stay afloat. So no, I don't think that there was anything like, I was never quite in danger. Like, even when I couldn't crack into the cool downtown scene that I wanted to be in, partly probably because everyone knew I was stealing Stretch Armstrong's mixes and like he was the guy. I was still playing random bars uptown and whatever it took.
Was it difficult to be so candid about Missteps?
I didn't mean to write such a personal book about like addiction and compulsion, but I realized as I was writing it, and I was like, this book's called Night People. I'm talking about why we all went out at night. Like, if I don't talk about drugs and addiction and that thing, like it's kind of a blatant omission. So yeah, the book started to evolve and get more personal as I went, but I liked the missteps. I thought the missteps and the failures are often more funny and entertaining to read about than the successes anyway.
In your role as a producer, you both have to be a songwriter, musician, but you also have to coach another talent. What is the key to navigating that relationship successfully?
I think it's putting ego aside. I think if I'm in the studio with some superstar and we're fighting over the idea of a lyric or something like that, at the end of the day, I can plead my case as much as I want. They're the person that has to go sing it for the next 2 years and potentially the rest of their life.
Are there any specific instances where you have sort of relented on your vision and felt like that was ultimately the right choice?
I think basically any creative argument I've ever had with Bruno Mars, I think I've won maybe 20% of them, but that's because 80% of the time he has the best idea in the room. Yes, I think as a record producer, you're part life coach, part cheerleader, part arranger, part songwriter, like all those things. And different artists you work with probably need certain ones of those tools and then not others, you know? And like when I think about the producers that I grew up kind of idolizing, whether it's Quincy Jones, Rick Rubin, Nigel Godrich, I could be just projecting, but they all seem to have like different things of the toolkit. Like, I don't think Quincy was as much in there like tuning the snare and like, you know, as the engineer, but he had all the other, I mean, he's fucking brilliant. He had all the other things. Rick Rubin seemed more like the one who was like, could amazingly channel into the artist, get the absolute best out of them. Nigel Godrich seemed to be like a little bit of all of those things, probably. I guess the most significant idea I ever had in the way that like affected my career and the fact that I'm standing here were probably the piano chords to Back to Black, because I came up with that the day that I met Amy Winehouse, and then arguably Amy Winehouse and the music that we made together is the reason I have a career. So I think if I had to trace it back to the butterfly effect of that, it would be those chords.
What are the most important questions you ask artists that you're working with?
It kind of goes back to working with Amy. I just remember her coming into the studio. I didn't know much about her. I knew the album Frank a bit, and I just remember saying, what kind of album do you want to make? Like, what do you want it to sound like? And then she played me a bunch of 60s girl group pop stuff that she said, you know, I play this down at my local or whatever, and like it was cool, Shangri-Las, and I barely knew any of that music. I knew it from like Goodfellas, right? When they're like shoving someone in a trunk, playing this music over it. I was just so inspired by her. just like willing to try and give a shot to give this person what they just asked me for, essentially. So it feels really obvious, and I always thought that was such an obvious thing, but then I'll work with artists and be like, oh, that's so cool that you asked me what kind of record I wanted to make. To me, I'm like, who would not ask that question? That feels like literally like ground zero. But yeah, what do you want your record to sound like? What do you want to sing?
What was the last record that you heard that made you jealous?
I did love on the last Tyler record. Like, there's just such a clever way, and it's like these soulful, moog, kind of almost Stevie-ish progressions with these like drums that are sort of that like Andre 3000, like Love Box era. What's that great song he did with Khalees, Millionaire? Like, it's all in that zone. It's all these references of things that I really like, and I'm like, God, why does it sound so fresh and exciting and modern when he does it, you know? There's nothing in a long time that's made me feel like, oh fuck, that's heavy, or like worried for my job, you know?
If you were giving advice to a new artist trying to break in 2025, what would you tell them?
I would be terrified to be a new artist trying to break now, because at some point it seems so, it's like, you know, there's what, 10,000 songs a day that come out like on Spotify, like, but find your little niche and you just keep putting out music, and then hopefully something hits. But the main thing is to just like, the thing that I learned, the only thing that I could really say as advice is just that lesson I learned with Back to Black. It's like 10 years of trying to emulate the sound of other people and then just giving up and making something that was exciting to me. The thing that's the most exciting to you will always be most likely the thing that's most exciting to other people.
As a, producer and songwriter who doesn't, particularly tour or have like a huge merch business, do you think that the economics of the music industry today are tenable for young artists?
No, the economics are terrible. Like, I do think as just purely streaming and whatever you want to call it, sales, it would be impossible. Like, I think that's why you have to do like, yeah, like you said, if you don't have merch or these kind of things, like, you have to be clever and find it, because it kind of sucks. I've had a lot of ideas that I've really believed in, and someone's gone like, nah, it's not really the thing, and you just have this sixth sense that it's worth chasing. I think with Uptown Funk, it took us 7 months to finish, and we'd run out of ideas, and everyone was frustrated, and I would wait a month, call up Jeff Basker, call up Bruno Mars, be like, hey, you want to get back together and try and finish that song? And there were a lot of times that song definitely nearly got thrown in the trash. But hopefully your sixth sense is like telling you, and then sometimes you're wrong. Sometimes you chase something through and it wasn't a thing.
Do you have any point of view on the use of AI in music?
Yeah. I haven't really used any of the software where you just like punch in a prompt, like, give me something that sounds like a 60s funk song. I've used ChatGPT, and I've said, like, I have a progression. It's A minor 7 to B major 7 or whatever it is. Like, where can I go? If I wanted to write something in the style of, just insert the name of any composer, where do I go? Like, in my weird brain, like, that's more honorable than throwing your music into it, which you can also do, and say, like, tell me where this song should go next. Just like having it spit back chord changes or something, it feels less like cheating. But there's this line that you hear people kind of tout, that no AI will ever be able to make you feel the way that like a Stevie Wonder vocal does. I'm not sure, because Stevie Wonder is my all-time fucking king, but like, it might get close, the way technology is. But I just have to believe that there's something about the human experience in art that we'll always have like a sixth sense for.
Do you think about the algorithm when you're making music?
You know, it's funny, like, yes, in the way, certain things, coming in quick with a hook, or just like, you know, I like old school orchestration and arrangements, and I think of my favorite old records in the 60s and 70s that start with like a gentle moog that grows into something else, and then the drums come in. Like, you have 4 to 6 seconds to capture people's attention now. That's just what it is. I remember on the Miley Cyrus song Nothing Breaks Like a Heart, there's like 4 bars of this string thing that comes in before her voice comes in, and I was just like, I remember just fighting the label, like, we can't just come in with her voice, which is so strong and powerful, singing this extremely heartbreaking, powerful lyric off it. It just, I don't care if that's what works for the algorithm. So there's times that sort of fight it, but you know, I still want the song. I don't want to say I still want to win. That sounds so empty, but I still want the song that I've labored over for 7 or 8 months or a year or two, like, to have the best chance possible. I mean, the biggest record that I've ever been a part of, Uptown Funk, is I think it's like 4 minutes or something. That's like algorithm suicide, you know? So you don't really know. I think that I'm a good listener, and I don't really have much ego in the studio, so I'm always willing to let somebody has the better idea lead. There were times in my life earlier on where I had this mentality, like, I'm the producer, like, I have to have the best ideas. Someone like Bruno Mars, I remember when we were working on Unorthodox Jukebox, he's as good a producer as anyone in the room, you know? So, like, he's gonna come with an idea. There's part of me that's in my brain that's like, I'm older and I'm the producer, like, why is he telling me what to do? And then you're like, oh, because he's amazing and he has amazing ideas. I think that was like a good learning curve for me.
A lot of the music that you came up loving was sort of built off of the back of the music of the 70s and late 60s. A lot of the music that you've made as a producer sort of calls back to that period. To some degree, it feels like we've sort of entered an era where the snake is eating its own tail,
Right.
where people are sampling samples of records. Is there any sort of innovation that you are inspired by in the world of songwriting and music creation?
I mean, the people that are really, really creative and brilliant, like, I think of like a Tyler or a Metro, like, yes, there's things that point to the era I loved and the era I came up in, but it still feels so exciting and fresh because it's like their creative, artistic imprint is still the strongest thing. I actually remember looking at this songwriting credits for that song Big Po and seeing like Q-Tip, Ali, and Fife mentioned as writers, and like I just listened to the song and I couldn't even pick out the Tribe thing. I started DJing in '93. It felt like a throwback to play something from Off the Wall by Michael Jackson. You know, that felt long ago. Now to think about something like 15 years ago, like that's like 0 to 100 by Drake or something. Like, so wild that's... So I guess if you think about it, Off the Wall to Time for Some Action, that feels like a big sonic jump and kind of moving around. Like, I don't think in the last 15 years we've had an evolution that's as major as that, but
I mean, given the sort of dramatic shifts in technology, is that surprising to you?
I think there was a shift from the 80s to the 70s. If you think of the Jackson 5, I Want You Back, and then you think of Michael Jackson's Human Nature, like, those are so sonically different. They're only like 12 years apart. And the interesting thing is that there's no way that you could have made Human Nature in 1972 or even 1977. Everything about it, the technology, the sequencers, the samplers, the synthesizers. I don't know if I've heard a record in 2025 that I could genuinely say, like, there's no way you could have made this in 2012. Like, it's some reason, like, the technology is evolving faster, but it hasn't changed the sound of the music that much. Whether that's for better or for worse, I don't know.
There's a constant drumbeat of news articles about shifts in how kids are relating to one another, whether that is drinking less, having less sex, going out less. Do you hear that sort of in the music that is being made today?
I would never say, like, kids, what are you doing? You should go out and get drunk. But it seems like a good thing. Like, I don't know. Like, is that it seems like kids, like, how could you say that drinking less is like a bad thing or chastise anyone for it? Yes, actually, you know what, though? Like, there is, and maybe that's always the same with pop music, but it's easy to just say it now. Like, there is a melancholy. And I also read this study that said kids who are like 15, 16 now have only grown up with the phone and with social media, and they don't know any other way, but they know that they don't like this the way it is, but they haven't ever seen like we did, like what it was before, which I feel for kids.
Do you remember the change as a DJ, like the moment that surveillance in the club became a thing that was happening?
Well, I think about the rooms that I was in and the rooms I was playing into the late 90s, early 2000s. And there was definitely shit going on that probably if there were phones and documenting, like, it wouldn't have felt as wild and free. And people were more free and present. And I think about this club life that was around in like 98, 99. It had a really quick run, but for this moment that was there Friday night, it was just the absolute biggest thing in the city. And playing Hard Knock Life and looking at Jay and Damon Dash like over at their table, like lording over this entire scene of like, you know, whatever, 500 people shoved into this tiny corridor singing Hard Knock Life at the top of their lungs. And I do think if the phones were out, people were filming at this thing and like filming Jay and Damon and like each other singing, like we would have lost some of what made it special. The feeling of people being present was nice. Now I do think, and I couldn't tell you what year it happened, but there's certainly a shorter attention span in the club. There's like, you drop a song, like a big song, everybody goes nuts for like the first 30 seconds, 40 seconds, and then it sort of starts to wane, or at least in certain crowds. Like, yeah, the phone has just like shrunk our attention span for everything. And I think, listen, it's not an absolute, but I notice it. I'm just as fucking guilty of it.
In the book, you talk a lot about sort of those teenage parties being so instrumental for sort of setting the tone for every other scene in nightlife in the city.
Yeah, there were the raves and all those things. It was a different New York. It was like, even if you either had like a really shitty fake ID that you get in Times Square, or like often like some sob story could get you through the door. You know, it was like really like it's sort of sweet, and then at the same time, like, would I want my kids raging like that? I don't really know.
As the father of a 10-year-old daughter, I think about that a lot.
Yeah, I know. I think about that when I was writing the book and being very like upfront about the things. I'm like, this is definitely going to be thrown back in my face when my daughter's 16 and comes home 2 hours later than curfew, and she's like, Dad, you did fucking heroin when you were 18 or whatever it is. But I had a conversation with Dax Shepard about it on his podcast, and he was like, yeah, but I think that by that age, is there anything I'd want to be hiding from my daughters? Like, I'm not sure, so we'll see. But yeah, I've definitely like lost a little leverage.
Fair. Well, thank you very much for the time and the candor, and I really
Yeah.
appreciate your thoughts on all of these different things. Let this be the beginning of the change.org petition for you to write the second book. 'Cause,
Yeah.
I very much look forward to reading that as well.
Thank you.